Grandmaster Nightfalls are back. There are a lot of guides out there for specific strikes, and those can be helpful, but they honestly won't solve the main problem for most teams. GMs are a different experience and require different tactics, and after clearing this season's menu, I've selected the 4 most important tips to succeed. Some of them are loadout tips, while some others are habits that may take some practice to get used to, but they will all help make you a better player. Tip number 1, control the enemies. Pay attention to where and why enemies spawn. Now, just like any video game, the hundreds of enemies in a strike aren't just hanging out waiting for you to show up. They spawn in when something specific happens. That's usually one of 3 things. You moved forward, you interacted with something, or you killed a different enemy. So in GMs, it's important that you don't do those things until you're ready for a new wave of enemies. That means you've killed everything you can see, and you've prepared and positioned yourself for combat. Now, there are very occasional exceptions to this, notably the mini-me version of the boss in Glassway, but it is true the overwhelming majority of the time. If you can see it, shoot it, before you move forward or otherwise do something that might prompt more enemies to appear. And when they do appear, do everything you can to spawn kill them, whether it's with grenades, wither horde, or just shooting who you can as they arrive. Tip number 2, overlapping fire. When an encounter starts, it's tempting for everyone to go to the best spot, usually the one with the safest cover. But stacking up in one place means being less of a threat to enemies and making it easier for them to kill you, especially when splash damage is so powerful. If they can shoot you from 5 different directions and you can only shoot back from one, that's a major disadvantage for your team. So set up the opposite, the ability to shoot at the enemies from multiple angles that overlap with each other. And that means having at least one player set up in a different place. Not only can you shoot enemies that are shooting at somebody else, but it makes it easier to use things like rockets and barricades without having to coordinate. It's important that you don't go too far away, because each position needs to help the other, either by shooting things or going for a res. But in general, Destiny is moving away from having players stand still or stand together in groups. So embrace that and move to positions where you can enable your team to have overlapping fire. Tip number 3, burst damage is king. The most important moment in any GM is when a champion is stunned. You need the ability to nuke them as fast as possible, especially overload champs, who are incredibly deadly and briefly immune from being re-stunned after they recover. So unless you're running Divinity, which creates crit spots for teammates, you need the ability to do massive damage fast. That means heavy weapons, and either rockets or linear fusion rifles. Rockets should probably be your first choice, as aiming is basically optional, and the ammo scavenger mod, which goes on your leg armor, is incredibly cheap this season. Even better is a rocket launcher with 2 rockets in the mag. It could be Gallarhorn or a legendary launcher with Clown cartridge as a perk. Ambitious Assassin can also work, but it requires a kill first, so it's not as convenient. Whatever you do run, make sure to use Lucent Finisher as well, which is a class item mod that's found on the seasonal artifact and makes generating heavy ammo incredibly easy to do. Don't be afraid to use your supers on champions as well. For GM Nightfalls, the bosses are almost always less of a threat than the champions are, so don't save your super for a future time that may never come. The 4th and final tip is embrace the burn. It was surprising and a bit controversial when Bungie contradicted their previous promise that acute burn modifiers would not be found at GMs this season. These modifiers mean receiving 50% more damage from a particular element, which can be very, very painful, especially since enemies in Grandmaster Nightfalls are already 25 levels above you. But luckily, this acute burn modifier also means dealing 25% more damage in that element. As a result, your heavy weapon should always match the burn if at all possible. Void burn, void rockets or linear fusion. Arc burn, same thing. Also, your energy weapon should usually match the burn unless you are specifically on shield breaking duties. And even then, try to use Arbalest or a new perk called Adaptive Munitions if at all possible. Now, most people, me included, default to loadouts that are familiar and comfortable, especially in tough challenges. But the damage boost that you get from the burn, especially on heavy weapons, is just too powerful to pass up. So take advantage even if it means trying something new. Who knows, you may end up finding a new favorite weapon in the process. Alright, I hope you found these 4 tips useful. Go back and review them as you go through Grandmaster Nightfalls, particularly the first 2 tips about how you fight. And you'll find that as you get used to them and incorporate them into your tactics, you'll have a much easier time clearing these challenges. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more videos, and have a great day.